Hey, what's up guys? Today I want to do something a little different and we're gonna just do a straight up 13 from 17 patch notes rundown. Unscripted, just kind of what I think is happening with these patches and these changes, if anything is super significant, if anything isn't so significant, and you can continue to play these champions. So let's just go ahead and jump right on into it, not waste any time here. So Aatrox is just getting a couple damage type changes. Physical to magic on both his passive and his W. Really doesn't do anything for the champion. I think he's still a pretty strong bruiser in the top lane and maybe the mid lane in some circumstances. Obviously he's not as strong as he was on 13-14, where he did receive those buffs along with the Duskblade buffs. But he's still very, very, very viable here in solo queue and competitive, I think, in certain matchups. Maybe he's opting a little more into a more bruisery build with Gore Drinker now. Since Duskblade did get slightly nerfed, maybe it's not a nerf but more of a change, but we'll get it back into that later. Either way, short term, Aatrox is still very strong. Akshan, see, this is what confuses me. So health growth increase, armor growth increase, AD growth down by 0.5. So basically he's just getting some extra base stats for laning, and then laning damage is down. So it all kind of ends up evening out here. He's going to be a little bit more tanky, maybe a couple more auto attacks, one or two more auto attacks built into his health early game, and then he'll probably take one or two more auto attacks to find lethal on an enemy champion in lane. Obviously this all doesn't do relatively anything for Akshan past 20-25 minutes. As soon as he starts to get his items, the AD growth is not going to matter at all, but obviously he's still going to enjoy that health growth and armor growth. So he's going to scale better inside of the lane and throughout the game. So I think Akshan is still very, very strong. I think he's been underplayed for a long time. So if you haven't, definitely pick up Akshan. Super, super strong champion. Blitzcrank, base health up, MR up, attack speed down, attack speed ratio down, and then a few changes here. Overall, when reading these yesterday, I interpreted these changes as just moving Blitzcrank out of the jungle. They tried to change it a while ago and it never really stuck, so they're just kind of reverting those non-champion damage buffs they gave him. He's obviously still a very situational support pick, and no one really ever picked him in jungle, so that's what I interpreted the changes as. Not really impactful for support Blitzcrank at all. Elise. Now this is interesting because they nerfed a number of strong solo queue junglers. Now this is interesting because in this same patch they actually nerfed a number of strong solo queue junglers that are later in this list, and they wanted to buff Elise to have maybe more early game proactivity inside of the jungle. But I really don't think these buffs are doing anything for her. She's getting a little extra AP on her spiders, a little extra healing on her spiders, and then a little bit extra stun duration on her cocoon at max rank. But the problem is she maxes cocoon last, so in terms of early game pressure and ganking capabilities, this actually isn't going to do anything. She's just going to have a little bit of a faster clear, a little bit of a healthier clear, and outside of that, she's still going to scale like trash and completely fall off a cliff past 20 minutes. So I still don't think Elise is in a very good spot. These changes don't really make any sense to me. Gnar, when I read these yesterday, I was actually like, whoa, these are pretty significant. So his Boulder Toss is getting a lot of extra base damage, 20 at max rank, as well as his W is getting 20 damage at all ranks as well. This is pretty significant because Gnar isn't a champion that typically stacks a lot of AD. Maybe he'll go Triforce first into a Hullbreaker. He usually stacks health after his first item. So these base AD ratios getting increased is actually pretty significant for his lane phase, I think. It gives Mega Gnar a lot more capability for all-in and finding lethal, and it also gives him the capabilities of matching other bruisers like Darius and Jax and Fiora and things like this in terms of damage outputs in the lane phase. So I think these changes are actually pretty significant for Gnar, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him a little bit more heading into Worlds as well. Hecarim. We'll assume he got some nerfs. Base mana is up by 3, mana growth down, mana regen up, mana regen growth up. So, I mean, mana's never really an issue on this champion if you're managing it well. as well as clearing your camps obviously restores your mana. So I'm not entirely sure where these changes are coming from or why they need to be made. Q Rampage, 30 mana cost at all ranks instead of scaling down from 28 to 20. Again, not entirely sure what these changes are accomplishing, because when you see these kinds of changes, as in base mana is up and mana growth down and mana regen and all this stuff, it all relatively evens out. So it's not really actually gonna make any noticeable difference. Maybe in like 1 out of 100 games, the Hecarim doesn't have enough mana to Q one more time to get a kill or something like that. But you have to actually think about how these changes will translate into the game. And in terms of Hecarim gameplay, it's really not going to make any difference, because all of this mana junk, it pretty much negates each other, and then it'll just even out to where he is right now. The only thing really meaningful to talk about here is the W Omnivamp, which is going down from 25% heal to 20% of the damage dealt. So a little bit of a nerf on his W heal, but not too much to talk about in terms of Hecarim. I still think he's a fine champ in solo queue and can definitely terrorize when played correctly. Kane, now this is where interesting things start to happen. W, Blade's reach, physical damage, base damage down from 90 to 85, and 270 down to 265. So he's losing 5 flat AD at all ranks on his W, and then the percent AD scaling is going down by 20%. So this is actually a pretty big touch to Blue Kane, which I think is definitely needed, especially in higher ELOs. Blue Kane is absolutely broken in my opinion. And obviously Blue Kane's main ability usage is his W inside of those walls. So I think this is a pretty big nerf for Blue Kane, but I think it honestly might be a little too much. Like, taking 5 base damage off as well as 20% bonus AD scaling is actually really significant. So I wouldn't be surprised if we started seeing a lot more Red Kane inside of solo queue. I never thought Red Kane was weak per se, but he's definitely not as strong as Blue Kane is. Again, speaking in high ELO terms. In low ELO, Red Kane is absolutely broken, can just 1v9 everything. But I think this nerf is actually pretty significant for higher tiers Kane players, and we will see if we see a decrease in Blue Kane players from that. Another jungle champion nerf, Taste Their Fear on Khazix. Base damage is remaining the same, and AD ratio is down by 5%. So this doesn't do a whole lot. I still think Khazix is quite viable. And with the Q evolve and the isolation damage, it actually kind of evens out. So this change doesn't really do a whole lot, and Khazix is going to be totally fine. Now for Kindred, her E damage, base damage is remaining the same, bonus AD is remaining the same, and the mark damage for missing health is also. So what am I missing here? 5%. Okay, so damage is going from 8% missing health to 5% missing health. So just a little less execute damage on the Kindred E. Again, obviously, yes, it does a lot of damage, but on Kindred you're maxing E last, so it doesn't actually equate to all that much. She's still going to be a scaling monster, and she's still going to be a really strong champion. I don't think that her E is the reason Kindred is a strong champion right now. So again, it seems consistent in this patch that I don't really know where these changes are coming from, because a lot of these nerfs and buffs are not the reasons why these champions are or aren't being played. Moving on to Lux, base mana regen from 8 to 7, passive damage from 20 to 190, plus 20% AP to 30 to 200, based on 25% AP, so that's actually pretty significant damage buff for her passive, which is quite nice, weaving in that auto attack with her combo in lane phase especially. Q cooldown is going to be 11 seconds at all ranks now, which I think is fine. You're never really getting 2 Qs off in a fight anyways, unless you really have a lot of CDR and you have max rank Q. And then her E damage is getting a slight touch on the base damage, 5 at all ranks there. So overall, with the passive buff and the E nerf, I think it's actually a bit of a buff for Lux. So I think this champion has quite the capabilities, maybe more so in the support role than the mid lane role, because in mid lane she is very vulnerable, Even though she does have a lot of range, she's still very vulnerable to ganks, especially with common mid laners now. Having a good amount of gank setup with things like Azir, things like Syndra, and other champions like that. So I think overall Lux is in a good spot, and maybe you can try picking her up. Nefiri. Now I never knew what this champion really did to begin with, so I'll do my best here. Base health is down 15, which is fine. Passive cooldown up 5 seconds at all ranks, or all levels rather. Nefiri's pack mates will now take 100% bonus damage from melee attacks. Okay, so it's easier to get rid of her passive dogs. And then that's a whole lot of junk that I don't really feel like reading, so I'll just read this up here. Q damage and heal decrease, E damage decrease. So overall Nefiri getting a little bit of a damage nerf, which I think is really, really good. This champion was absolutely terrorizing everyone in solo queue, at least that I could see, and she definitely needed a little bit of nerfs coming out of her release. So I think these are fine. I still think she'll be an acceptable champion. Honestly, as far as assassins go, she's actually pretty significantly better than both Zed and Talon, and way better than Kiana in my opinion. So I think she's still a pretty viable champion in the mid lane, and I think with the way she scales, she'll be just fine. Orianna, health growth up 5, and command dissonance, magic damage, base damage up 10 at rank 1 and 30 at rank 5, and the AP ratio is staying the same. So just giving her some more base damage on the W. Honestly, when I first read this, I thought that maybe W max Ori would come back. Maybe that could be a thing to play more of a more burst oriented style build. If you wanted to just go like straight magic pen and then burst people with your RW combo instead of having more consistent ball control, I think that could be a good option for having more lane pressure, being able to get prio in lane and invade with your jungler. So this could actually translate to quite a bit of Orianna play, I think. It's actually a pretty significant damage buff early, and I think that she definitely has been an underrated champ for a while. She's just a good all-around champ, and I think that she could definitely see some upcoming play, maybe heading into Worlds. Quinn, health growth up 8. Blinding Assault Q physical damage is up by 20 at rank 5. Base damage, AD ratio remains the same, AP ratio remains the same. So Quinn just getting some extra base damage on her Q, which will help her in the lane phase, maybe getting that extra lethal kill, or you know, getting some extra poke in. And then her E, vault physical damage, base damage is down 20 at rank 5, and then bonus AD is staying the same. So I think, considering that you're not really using your E for damage ever, that's not the point of the ability, this is a pretty negligible change. Her Q damage is actually very nice for her, so I think we might be able to see some more Quinn top lane in solo queue or something like that. I think she's actually a decent champion. Alright, Samira, pretty easy here, just base health is up 30, which is actually a lot of base health. Pretty significant change here. She's going to be able to be much more healthy inside of the lane, not get poked out as easily by longer range characters. So I think this is a pretty nice change for Samira. Obviously she doesn't see a whole lot of playing competitive, but for any solo queue Samira players, this is definitely going to be a pretty nice change for the champion. Tryndamere, base stats, attack range up 50, attack damage down 4. Now this is interesting because when you think about Tryndamere, he's an attack damage based champion. So I think that actually taking off 4 base AD is actually pretty significant, especially in the early lane phase when he wants to stack up that Fury and look for lethals with Ghost on his opponent, chasing them down. It could actually make a difference of 1 or 2 auto attacks more to kill. But the attack range is also pretty interesting because most Tryndameres these days also take lethal tempo. So with plus 50 attack range and a fully stacked lethal tempo could actually negate the attack damage nerf because you can attack theoretically more often. I think that this is kind of interesting, but I also think that Tryndamere is still a very, very strong champion, very underutilized in all areas of play. Super good champion right now. Super good champion, so I recommend you pick him up. Twisted Fate, who I absolutely hate, haha. Wildcard magic damage. Base damage is remaining the same, and AP ratio is up 10. So I think here they're trying to make TF come back into the meta with a little bit more of an AP-oriented build. You know, for the longest time when we've seen Twisted Fate, it's the utility build, right? It's the Everfrost into RFC into Zonias. It's purely just a gold card bot build. And people don't recognize that if you actually build like regular mage items on this champion, he's actually, he does a decent amount of damage, right? With his gold card into his Q, into his empowered auto combo, it actually does a decent amount of damage. So I think the odds of us seeing Twisted Fate back in the meta because of this buff is very unlikely, but I think it's a step in the right direction for the champion. And instead of just being a gold card bot, he can provide a little bit more damage. I think this is kind of, he has a similar dynamic with Ahri, where people just build Ahri as a utility bot and just spam Everfrost and then build cooldown reduction to spam charms, when in reality, if you build damage on these champions, they actually do a significant amount of damage. So it will be interesting to see if we see any TF in the near future. Vex, Q magic damage, base damage is up 10 at all ranks. That's just a nice little buff for her. Just a little more extra damage on her Q, and her W cooldown is going down 4 at rank 1, still remaining 12 at max rank, but I want to say you max W last on Vex. I'm not positive on that, but I know you max Q first, so if you do max W last, this is going to be a pretty negligible buff, or nerf rather, on that cooldown until you get into the level 18, which especially in solo queue doesn't happen very often. But still, the extra Q damage will prove pretty helpful inside of the lane especially. Vi. Passive shield strength up from 10% to 12%, denting blows, passive cooldown reduction up 1 second, E, relentless force cooldown down 2 seconds at rank 1, and then R, cease and desist damage is down 100 at rank 3 and 50 at rank 2, and then the AD ratio also nerfed by 20%. So I think that Vi, these are actually pretty nice changes for Vi. Extra shield strength is pretty nice for skirmishing. Passive cooldown reduction, although it's only 1 second, it's actually pretty helpful. For those of you who play Vi, you actually rely on this passive shield a lot, so just being able to have it up as much as possible is very, very nice. E, relentless force cooldown will help the early clear a little bit more, and then the R nerf really doesn't do anything because obviously you're not using Vi ultimate as a damage ability, right? The focus is on it is to just lock down a priority target, right? So the damage doesn't really matter. I think that Vi, these are actually pretty nice changes for Vi. I still don't think the champion is great, but we might see her back in the meta and competitive anyways. Xerath, base mana regen from 8 to 6.85, passive mana surge cooldown refund on unit kill from 2 to 2.5 seconds. So basically they're just nerfing the amount of mana you have in the base mana regen, and then buffing the amount of mana you get back from your passive, so it probably just evens out overall. And then the mana cost of Eye of Destruction W is from 70 to 110 to 80 to 120. So your W is going to cost a little bit more mana, but again, with those passive buffs, it's probably not actually going to translate to any meaningful difference. So I think that Xerath is still a super OP champion, and as long as he can be killing you from 2 or 3 screens away, he's going to be a strong champion. Xin Zhao, passive determination, heal on 3rd stack from 6 to 74, plus 10% AD, plus 65% AP, from 3 to 4% based on level, plus 65% AP. So this is pretty interesting. No one really plays Xin Zhao right now, and the reason he's not being played is not his passive heal. This change makes absolutely no sense to me, and it's not going to be making Xin Zhao a priority pick in the jungle anytime soon. If anything, it's going to make him less played because you're not going to be building AP Xin just for the heal. You want to be building AD and health on this champion, so putting his passive heal more focused into AP makes absolutely no sense to me. So I think these are really bad changes for Xin, and he's still kind of a sucky champion. Zoe, base health regen up 1 point, and Sleepy Trouble Bubble magic resist reduction from 20 to 30% to 30% at all ranks. So this is actually pretty significant for Zoe, because Zoe's usually max E second, right? They max Q and then E. But now that you can just have 1 point at E and still have it do the same amount of damage reduction is actually really, really nice. So this is going to help her combos out early a lot, assuming you're consistently hitting your E's, which is obviously it's a skill shot oriented champion. But if you're doing so, this is actually going to translate to a pretty meaningful difference, honestly. And with the base health regen increase, just making her lane phase overall stronger. So I think it's definitely a possibility that we might see Zoe pop up back then, here and there. Especially with how popular poke comps are right now with Jace and Kai'Sa and Ezreal in pro play, I wouldn't be surprised to see Zoe pop up if we actually get to see competitive play on 13-17, which I think the Worlds patch is the next patch, but I'm not entirely positive. Maybe I'm just tripping. Alright, into items. Bloodthirster health requirement for bonus AD from 50% health to 70% health. This is fine. Bloodthirster's still a good item, and honestly, most ADCs build it for the lifesteal anyways. But obviously, the best or the bonus damage is helpful, just making it a little less consistent. But again, I don't think the bonus AD is the primary reason people are building this item. So I think Bloodthirster's still in a fine spot. Duskblade got changed a little bit, which is great. I think this this item was super, super broken for a while. So now you guys can read those. I'm not going to read all that. I think it is interesting though. Now destroys incoming non-tower projectiles when triggered. So it's really, even though it no longer makes the owner immune to damage while untargetable, it destroys incoming non-tower projectiles. So it's basically the same thing. I don't understand what Riot's doing. A lot of these changes just negate themselves inside of one item or one champion, so it's pretty interesting to me where they're coming from. Even Shroud, damage amp from 10% to 7%, this is fine. Even Shroud has been pretty much the only support item consistently built for a while, especially since engaged supports are very meta right now. So hopefully there will be more diversity there. I think Locket's a really underutilized item. I think Shurelya's sucks, so you know, Even Shroud is still probably better than Shurelya's, but especially, hopefully Enchanters are coming back into the meta because they never really fell off in the first place. People just stopped playing them because they're bored or something. Enchanters are still the best supports in the game. They scale the best, they're the easiest to play, and they're the most effective. So Moonstone and Echoes of Helia are still super, super strong support items. So if you're playing Enchanters, just build those. Gore Drinker, item recipe changed, and then it has plus 400 health. So yeah, just kind of nice buff for Gore Drinker. Not a whole lot to say there. It's just more bruiser item now. Immortal Shield Bow, Lifeline Shield from 215 to 500 to 290 to 500. This item wasn't really built a lot at all, and if you are building it, honestly, you're just trying to preserve KDA and job security. The item sucks, and I don't think this is going to make it not suck. If you really want a lifeline on an ADC, you're probably going Maw, and the Bloodthirster lifesteal usually does as much as lifeline anyways, as long as you're hitting something. So I think this item is still pretty bad, and we're probably not going to see it built very often. Spear of Sojin, new recipe, item costs, AD down 5, health up 150, and then the haste, the ability haste on it for melee champions, going from 8% bonus AD to 16 flats, 4% bonus AD, and then similar change for range champions. So what this really means is that they're putting more base haste into the item instead of making it scale better with AD. So what this means is that top laners who build this item, maybe say like Jax or Renekton from time to time, or Jace likes to build Sojin, you don't have to be stacking AD to get a lot of value out of the extra haste. It's much more loaded into the flat haste now instead of the scaling AD. So really, you could even build this thing on tanks and heavy bruisers, and it would still be pretty effective for you. I think it's an interesting change to have it so you don't have to actually actively stack AD to get value out of the haste. So I think it's an interesting change, and we'll see if Sojin gets any extra value from these changes. Alright, getting close to the end here. Static Shiv, bonus damage against champions from 100 to 180 plus 30% AP to 100 to 180 plus 15% AP. So I think they're just trying to get this champion off, or this item off of AP champions, meaning that, you know, LeBlanc and Veigar and these kinds of champions aren't going to be building Shiv anymore because the Chain Lightning is AP ratio is significantly down. So I think this is fine. It's an AD based item anyways, and it shouldn't be built on mages, so this is a fine change. Stridebreaker just up 75 health. Honestly, it doesn't really do a whole lot. There's a reason Stridebreaker isn't purchased very often, and it's only purchased on a select few champions. And I don't think the reason was it was missing 75 health. So I don't think Stridebreaker is going to be the mythic option for bruisers really ever. It's still going to be either Triforce or Gore Drinker probably. Okay, and then the 1 rune change for Futures Market, that limit starting at 145 plus 5 per minute, now starts at 100 plus 8 per minute. I don't know exactly how the math will work out here, but I'm assuming it'll end up, as it says here, buff starting at 18 minutes, slight nerf earlier in the game. But honestly, people who take Futures Markets, you're not really getting a whole lot of value out of it early anyways. Maybe you're picking up an extra longsword from it, but honestly, the big spike for this rune comes in the mid game anyways, so I think that this is a solid change for the rune, and I really hope that people are going to start looking at this rune over Biscuits because it's infinitely more useful. This rune is actually super broken in certain situations, and Biscuits don't do anything. So yeah, Futures Market, good. Overall for systems, they're changing catch-up experience a little bit. They added a patience bar to Dragon, and that's pretty much all we got in terms of that. So that's going to be the end of this patch rundown for patch 13.17. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys are thinking of this patch down in the comment section, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. See you next time.